All right, for this practice, this is an Iyengar practice. You'll want a few props, a block, a chair, a bolster, a strap, and a blanket. And we're going to start in Tadasana, standing pose. You can take your feet as far apart as you'd like, hips width or farther. Grab the block between your two hands and squeeze the short ends of the block. Start by simply lifting your hands up shoulder height. And then if you find that you can reach your arms slightly higher, take your arms up as high as your shoulder mobility will allow, possibly even going completely overhead with your fingers pointing up to the ceiling. Squeeze the block with your palms and press your arms straight using your triceps. Feel the back of your head line up with the back of your pelvis, chin over your chest. Engage your thighs to draw your kneecaps up, and then really drive the center of your heels down into the floor. Breathe full breath from your belly in and up to your ribs, up to your lungs, up to the tips of your lungs, under your collarbones. Gaze could be up to the block or out towards the floor past the tip of your nose. And then release your block, release your arms. And we're going to take this into tree Vrikshasana. So you're going to balance on your left foot and start to slide your right leg up, or your right foot up the front of your left leg. Once you get your right foot up, either above your knee or even right on top, it's even, below your knee, on the knee is not a huge deal, as everybody makes it out to be. So wherever your right foot can go without pushing on the inside of your knee, of course. And then you're going to turn the right knee open. Squeeze the block with your hands. Take your arms back up above head. You're squeezing the outer hips in toward each other, and you're actually squeezing that inner left thigh into your right foot. You're not going to really push back with your right foot, rather push back into your left thigh from the outer right hip, because that's going to help to keep the right thigh externally rotated and abducted without lifting your glutes or popping your left hip out. Pull those front ribs in and stand a little taller. Again, drive down the center of that left heel. And maybe even challenge your balance here by looking up to the ceiling. And it can start simply with your eyes, and then maybe your head lifts up. There's going to be a very slight back bend. The back bend's going to be accentuated a little bit there. And then the balance goes when you look up all the way, and that's okay. We're going to switch to the second side. So you're going to be standing on your right foot, and you're going to take your left foot up the front of your right thigh this time. Use your left hand to assist, slide it up, and then once you can't get it up there any higher, it's fine. You're going to turn on the heel and turn your left toes back towards your inner right heel. Again, the left thigh is externally rotating and abducting, but you're not going to push the left knee out to the side of the room. Don't want the left hip to pop up. So if your left glutes are lifting up, probably over rotating from the hips, or the hip tilt rather than the hip rotation. And then squeeze that block with your hands. Straighten out your arms overhead. Squeeze your triceps. As much as you're squeezing that block and pressing your fingertips up, you're drilling down into the floor with your right heel. Ribs draw in again. Again, squeeze your inner left foot, or the left foot from your inner right thigh. So push into your left foot from the inner right thigh. Try not to hug your ears with your shoulders. And then you can take your gaze up. Slowly with your eyes, then maybe your forehead, then maybe your chin. And then you can feel that back bend. Then just take your left foot down and take a bit of a standing back bend. It just feels good. All right, we'll move on to Trikonasana, triangle pose. So I'm going to grab the chair now and put the chair on my mat. And I'm going to face the chair seat towards the backs of my legs. And I'm going to start Trikonasana in a wide leg stance. So right foot is going to be forward, left foot back. And I'm just measuring out here now to see where this chair needs to be. So I'm going to look and see I have the back two legs off my sticky mat. And then turn to face both sets of toes towards the long edge of your mat. Get your stance wide enough. Then from here, the right toes are going to turn out, the left toes are going to turn in. So the left toes turn in, right toes turn out. Take your right hand down to the chair seat behind your right leg. Then let your hips tilt as they need. Left hand can stay right there on your left hip, or you can reach back for the back of the chair seat back. If your stance feels too long, then shorten it. This is a bit of a lean back, a bit of a back bend. So this is not the classical expression of triangle that you're probably used to. So really stretching out the left side of your body. Push into the ball of your right foot. I'm going to move the chair forward so I can feel here in Trikonasana, I want the outer right thigh to press into the chair seat so that the right knee isn't turning in and falling down inside of the foot. Then you can open up for Trikonasana. All right, I'm going to flip this chair around so we can try this a different way. This is going to help to maybe work a bind. So I've flipped the chair seat so it's facing out away from me. Now I'm going to take my left hand behind and grab the top of that chair seat back. Then I'm going to take my right hand down towards the right towards the chair leg, okay? And that left hip is pointing out. It's not opening. It's pointing in the same direction of your left toes. My right hand's now coming down to the chair leg behind my right leg. And then here I'm opening the shoulders, but I'm not going to let myself open up farther because the chair is in the way. It won't let me. I'm using that chair behind my right hip to keep my hips from popping out as well. Pushing into both feet equally. Lengthen out your neck if you need to turn the gaze down to the floor or out to the side or up to the ceiling. So again, trying to get the neck even on both sides so that your right side isn't longer than the left side. Trikonasana, triangle pose. And this is a good prep for and setup for a half bind. Now bend your right knee, look down to the floor, and then come up to stand, and we'll switch sides. And turning your right toes back in and then turning your left toes out slightly so that your feet are back to the starting position in the wide leg stance. And then we'll turn the right toes in, left toes out. I'm going to switch the chair up here, flip it back around so the chair seat is facing the backs of your legs. Left hand is going to come down to the chair seat once I get it situated. And here right away, I'm going to fix this and have that chair seat right behind my left thigh. So my left knee is rotating out into the chair seat and not falling down inside my foot. Lean into that left hand, but at the same time, push your hand away. I was having a hard time getting that chair back here. It felt like it was miles away from me. Just really goes to show how much tighter that right shoulder is on me. So it is a bit of a lean back, really opening up. If my legs were longer here, wider apart, I feel like this may have been a little easier too to reach back because I would have been slightly lower towards the chair. Keep squeezing the left thigh and pulling the left kneecap up. And keep pressing into the chair with the outer left thigh. All right, so I'm again going to flip the chair around and try for the second expression here, the bind. So I flip the chair seat to face away from me. And then once I get the chair right behind me, at least two of those legs on the sticky mat so it doesn't go sliding out. And then I'm going to show you the other side. I want you to see the back view, just so you can see what's going on from a different perspective. So still the same side, my left foot's forward. Now I've got that left glute pushing into that chair seat. Again, it's not popping out behind me, and it's not pushing the chair away, but it's also not going to tilt in. The other thing I want you just to be careful of here is to resist the urge to turn the back of the right hip into the chair seat back. That's not what we're trying to do. This is not a pose where you want to fit your body between two panes of glass. That is a very unsafe verbal cue. Left knee can softly bend if you tend to hyperextend. Otherwise, the left knee should point in the direction of the second toe. Left hand can reach down the chair leg. Your right hand is back on the chair seat back. And again, you can feel the left glutes being, you're not necessarily pushing the chair away, but you can feel them making contact without popping out. And then the right hip, we are not pulling that right hip back. So there's space there. The right hip should be pointing out at an angle in the same direction as your right toes. So this twist should be coming from your torso, not your hips. This is an opening of your spine, not the hips. Press down, look down even, and check out that left knee. Make sure it's externally rotating so it's spinning back in towards the chair. And then again, lengthen out your neck. Both sides are equally long. From tailbone to head, a big, long diagonal line. Even from your right heel towards your head. And then when you're ready to come out of this, a couple different arm variations here. I'm just showing you. The right hand could have snuck over a little closer or back farther. So these are some good arm variations that I wanted to show you real quick. And then when you're ready to come out of it, you can bend your left knee and look down to the floor and start to press up to stand. And then once you get up to stand, you're going to straighten those legs out, turn the left toes in, and then just come back up out of that wide leg stance. All right, take your chair off to the side of your mat so it faces one edge of your mat. You can sit on the chair. We're going to move into Warrior 2. Make enough room at the top of your mat so that your right foot can step up there. And you're going to spin your right leg forward and your left leg back, just spinning on the chair. You can feel the outer right thigh. Hopefully, if you've got a chair leg like I do, you could, or like that chair side, you could feel your right thigh pushing into the chair. Your left leg pushes back, and you're going to lift up that inner left thigh off the chair seat. And then what happens is the left hip drops down. So you want to actually lift up that left hip and try to level out your two hips. So you can see here my right shoulder is lower, my right hip is lower. I just fixed it. And there we go. Now the right hip is lifting. So I'm really lifting the right sit bone, the sitting bone up, and pulling up from the front of the right hip. And press down into your feet. Your thighs are very strong. There's that constant inner lift of your inner left thigh so that you're not touching the chair with your inner left thigh. You can feel the back of your right hamstrings touching. Notice if you're leaning forward or back too much. Or the arm, like the right arm of mine was just lifting up a little too high. So that's lower now. And this can be really challenging, so we're only going to be here for a couple breaths and then lower down and then push back up, okay? So just go ahead and sit back down on the chair seat. Give yourself a break. Give your arms a break. I'm going to pull my right heel back in a little under the knee. It was a little too far forward. Now my shin looks a little bit more vertical. And once again, draw up the pelvic floor. Push down into that front inner thigh and lift up the back inner thigh. Stretch your arms out, push down into your outer left foot. I'm pretty close to the wall here. If I wanted, I could really push back into the wall with that heel. Level out your hips and draw in from the belly. So you're squeezing those two front hip bones in and toward each other to keep them level. Gaze is right out over your right fingers. Soft gaze with a long neck, and your neck is rotating on the axis. And then after just a few more moments here, you can come down, sit. And if you want to, in between sides, you could take a wide leg forward fold here. You could take a goddess stretch. Like right here, you could lean your elbows down on your thighs and just kind of open your hips up a little bit. And then we can move the chair off to face the other side. If you've got enough space on your mat, you could just spin and do the other side. So you really don't need to move your chair. I just wanted you to see the back view. So once again, coming down to sit on your chair, and the left leg this time will come to the top of your mat, left toes point straight forward, and then the right foot back. And when the right foot steps back, the heel is the farthest point behind. So the hips are turning at an angle. They're not squared off. And then again, you want to lift that left sit bone, lift the inner right thigh. When you do that, be careful not to send the left hip too low. So right here, I feel like I think I had to switch my stance up a little bit. I think I scooched that knee in. Another option here is to put a block behind your thigh and have it between that chair side, the chair edge, and your thigh. And then you can push into the block so your knee doesn't spill in, because that can be a really common misalignment. And then press back through your right foot, lift up that left sit bone. So the right sit bone is not lifting higher than the left, but you're lifting that inner right thigh. And then open your arms, look out over your fingertips. Squeeze your left thigh, push into your right foot. And you can feel your torso centered over the chair. You can feel your torso centered over your hips. And again, if you need to sit down, take a moment and then get back up into it. And break this up into different groups of energy bursts, because this can be a really challenging posture on the chair. All right, and then I'm gonna, so again, I've pulled my foot back in. I'm gonna take the block out for the second round. And then lift. And actually here, you could put a block under your sit bone if you feel like you're really tall and it doesn't seem like the proportions are working with the chair. Or if you're shorter and your foot doesn't hit the floor, put a block under your foot. And then maybe even try going for a longer stance on the second round. Push straight down into the center of your left heel. Stretch your left knee straight forward. That knee, yep, it should be right up and down vertical. So the knee over the ankle. Squeeze your right thigh so your right knee's not bending down towards the floor. And roll the inner left thigh up and open. Left thigh is strong. Push down into the right heel. Yeah, press back into that right heel. So my right heel was kind of coming in and my knee was starting to pucker and bend. And you've got the chair, so if you need to sit down and take a break and resituate, do that. All right. Warrior 2 on the chair. Really helpful way to practice this posture. So play with it. Again, use the wall if you want to press your heel into the wall. That's another really great idea. And then after your last big inhale, exhale, sit back down on the chair, and you can spin your feet back to face around again. Again, take a stretch, and we're going to move into Warrior 1 next. So you might want a bit of a break from the legs. If you need to take a standing upward hand pose and a quick vinyasa, you can move through chaturanga, up dog and down dog. Maybe a tabletop cat-cow movement. And then you're going to move your chair so that the chair seat is facing you and you're facing the end of your mat. So the chair back to the end of the mat. Step through your chair with your right leg, left leg back. So first, if you need to start out with high lunge, you don't need to put your left heel on the floor. This might be really tough with the left heel flat on the floor. But that left thigh is driving into the chair seat. So you're pushing your thighs forward, not your hips forward. The hip is angling out in the same direction of your left toes. So the thighs, that's what I'm trying to mime there, your thighs are rotating forward. And so is your left set of ribs. They're rotating forward towards that chair back. Pull the right heel back under your knee a little bit more. And then even if you wanted to, you could put a block between the back of your calf and that chair rung if you have that kind of a chair. Shin is vertical, arms lift. You don't even need to lift your arms. You could easily use the chair back here and just hold on to the chair back and pull your chest forward, but squeeze your left thigh and press that left thigh into the chair seat. And keep sealing down your left heel. So your right sit bone is on the chair and you're trying to push your left thigh towards the chair. All right, you can take your hands down. And then you're going to safely come out of the chair. So we can do the second side, but quickly I'll show you a chair, chaturanga vinyasa. Before Warrior 1, I said you could take a chaturanga on the floor, but here's a really good chair, quick flow. So my hands are on the chair seat, I'm taking cat-cow. And I'm going to move the chair a little farther out so you've got space, especially if you're up against a wall. Coming into plank pose on the chair, the hands just grip the edges of the seat. Up dog, hips to the chair seat, chest pulls through. You can stay on your toes or you can flip to the tops of your feet. Press down into the heels of your hands as you pull your hips towards the chair and lift your chest up to the ceiling. Open your heart. Now drop your chin, lift your hips, push into those hands, pull back into a chair-based downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. And again, you could do this on the floor without the chair if you want a quick burst of movement. Take your time, pause the video if you're moving, and then we can catch up on the second side, Warrior One. And take as long as you'd like in this downward facing dog just to let your neck relax, let your hips relax, stretch out the hamstrings. And when you're ready, we'll come up and stick the left leg through the chair. So if you've moved your chair forward, probably want to move it back a little bit just to have enough space for your left foot to be flat on the mat so that it's not overhanging off the edge. And here, again, if proportions are not working, put something under your left sit bone. So if you feel like it's too high, or if you're too tall. Here's a high lunge. Okay, so I was saying on the first side, if you don't want to do Warrior One, do high lunge, especially if you have any ankle issues. A sprained ankle, not going to be able to do Warrior One. All right, and then if you can, turn your right heel down. Again, you've got that right thigh trying to spin towards the chair seat, the lip of the chair seat, not your hip, because your right hip is going to point out in the same direction as your right toes. You might have to space out your feet, and again, you may need to put something under your left sit bone if you need a blanket or an extra little support there, something to boost your hip up higher, because you would like your shin to be vertical and you'd like your thigh to be somewhat parallel to the floor. And again, press into that chair with the right thigh, open your heart up to the ceiling. The right hip is out at an angle. The shoulders and the ribs are spinning forward. Again, if you need to use the chair back with your hands to get that sensation of your right ribs coming forward, sometimes that helps. You can simply reach the right arm up. Sometimes that helps to not twist in this pose. And then add the left arm when you feel like you've got a feeling for that biomechanics. So the left sit bone under, going forward. Right sit bone it's open where it needs to be so that the hips can be turning to the right slightly. Left hip is facing forward. The right hip is trying to face forward. You're just not squaring it forward. All right, and then take your hands down, sit on the chair, and pull your left leg out. And then again, if you want to take that vinyasa or simply just a forward fold here, stretch out. I'm going to take a wide leg forward fold. Rest your forehead on the chair seat. You can start to bend your knees and go side to side. You can stay on one side as long as it feels good. You want to kind of just keep one knee bent there and rest. You could even come down a little lower in a Skandasana, maybe both knees bend for a little goddess squat. All right, and then the next pose we're going to move into is a forward fold using the chair. So come up and fold your chair up. Turn the chair around so the bottom of the chair seat is facing out. And you're going to take the chair at an angle. So the legs are under sticky mat at an angle. And the top of the chair back is right at your hip crease below your hip bones. So when you fold, you'll pinch the top of the chair. And then take your hands down the chair legs. And maybe they don't come all the way down. It's fine. And you may have to resituate the chair. My chair is falling apart. It's okay. All right. And you can rest your forehead then down onto the chair bottom. You could use your hands to pillow your forehead. If you take your hands off the chair legs, they may kick out. Just be really careful with that. So you're not putting all your weight into the chair also. The chair is just there for you to keep your hips pretty open so you're not collapsing into the front hip joints, into the front hip flexors. And it's also there for alignment so you can feel your hips if they move back too far behind your heels. You don't want your hips to go behind your heels. You want your hips over the heels. The sit bones right over the backs of the heels. And you can take your hands out wide as long as you feel like the chair is not going to kick out. If it's at too much of an angle, it'll kick out. And if you're putting too much weight in it, it won't feel safe. So you can feel moving forward and backward where you need to be. Thighs are engaged. You could even squeeze a block between your thighs here for an extra prop. trick, a little prop usage to get you to really understand the sensations of the pose more. But feel how long your back is here. It's not about getting to your legs. This forward fold is not at all about getting to your legs. This is what you want in this forward fold, this long, natural curve of the spine without the low back flattening. And so there's this nice even curvature from tailbone to head. And then when you're ready to come up, take a half lift inhale, come up to your fingertips first, get the weight back in your feet. Hands back up to the chair, and then pull yourself up with bent knee, roll up. All right, I'm going to move myself out. I'm going to move this right into Warrior 3. I was too close to the wall. So right away, we're not even going to do anything differently, keeping the chair just as it was. And I'm going to take my right leg up, Virabhadrasana C, Warrior 3. So with me on Warrior 3, I have a tendency to lift my head up too high and not lower down enough with my torso. So this chair is really helping me to get the alignment a little bit better. And I have my right toes pressing into the wall. It helps me to remind to keep my right thigh engaged. You're really lifting up the right leg from the glutes here. So really focus on using your right glutes. The chair, again, is for that left hip to be in a nice rotation, a 90-degree rotation. And then try to get your head level with your hips. Soft bend in that left knee if you feel like it's locking out. We don't want that. And your hands are just on the chair for balance. You should be feeling the work in your back, in your left leg, and in your right leg. So you can play with where your hands are lifted up, lower them down. Notice when it just doesn't feel right. And I get this question a lot. How do I know my head's too high? How do I know it's too high? Well, just feel it out. And when I was starting to lift up higher, this didn't feel good. It didn't feel right. And you can see it's too high. My head's too high. And so right there is typically where I go into my Warrior 3, knowing that that's too high. I took my hands down a little lower. Okay, and then step down with your right foot. You can take a break, come up to stand. A little standing back bend if you want to open your heart. And again, get another chaturanga in if you want. I'm just going to move into a quick forward fold here, walking back with my feet, using the chair on my hands. So just experiment with it, have some fun with it, and play with using the props to feel the enhancement of the practice. Not to feel, am I doing this right? That's not the point. There's no right or wrong. Let's do side 2. So now you can angle the chair back into your hip creases. And I'm going to lift my left leg this time. So I'm going to lift from my glutes. So the chair comes right up into the hip crease. Right leg is strong, not locked out. Left leg lifts from the glutes. Again, I'm using the wall behind me to push my left foot into. You can even peek back and see how high your foot is. You don't want it too much higher than your hip. Resituate this chair if it's not feeling right. Keep that right knee from hyperextending and keep your chest open here. In the classical position, your arms will come forward and open out, open up in front of you, palms together even. And so that takes us more into a bit of a back extension. So there will be a slight back extension there. Really use those left glutes. Lift from your inner left thigh. Press into the left foot if you're using the wall. And then also something to be aware of is that your left toes are not turning out to the side. So make sure your left toes are pointing straight down. And again, playing with where your head is in line with your hips. If you feel like you're too high, take your hands down lower. And so here I'm going to show you those left toes turning out. We don't want that. That typically happens. It's easy to do that. So with the wall, it'll give you a better idea of if you're turning toes down. There we go. Lift head, lift chest. It all comes together in the end. So, playing with it. It doesn't have to look perfect. Sometimes you have to do the imperfect things to feel the imbalances, and you'll feel it doesn't feel right. It's not comfortable. It doesn't feel balanced. All right, soft bend in your right knee to step down on the floor with your left foot. And then come up to stand nice and slow, or you can take another forward fold here right into Uttanasan. We already did this, so you can take another brief forward fold right here if it feels good, using the chair since it's already set up. You could even put a soft bend in your knees for this one and let it be a little bit more relaxing, more for the back rather than the hamstrings. All right, let's come up and get that chair opened back up and sit the chair back down on the floor, seat facing you. And we'll take another vinyasa, so then hands on the chair seat, cupping the edges of the chair, walk your feet back, come into down dog first. Make sure you've got your heels of your hands firmly on the chair seat, because then you're going to slide on into plank pose. So push from your legs forward into plank. And then inhale, hips towards the chair seat. Lift your chest up to the ceiling, upward facing dog. You can stay on your toe pads, or here you could flip your feet and start to stretch your toes back behind you. Squeeze your thighs. Lift your chest, push into your hands. And then we're going to move this back up into downward facing dog. You can roll over your toes, or you can flip your toes first and then start to transition back into Adho Mukha Svanasana. So if you're not taking the roll over the toes, go ahead and flip your toes back under. And back to downward facing dog, Adho Mukha Svanasana. And take as long as you'd like here to stretch out your shoulders, let your head relax. Feel the lack of pressure in your wrists in this position. It's so nice. All right, so we're going to fold that chair up again, and then this time we're going to move into Pyramid Parsvottanasana. So this can be a challenging standing balancing pose, especially with the hips, to try to get them to remain level. So again, we're going to have the chair at an angle, and the hips are going to come into the top of the chair is going to come into your hip creases. And then your right foot is going to step forward a little bit, left foot back, left heel down. So you want that left heel down, and you want your heels lined up. So you might set your feet up first and then pull the chair up into your hip crease. There you go. So the right hip, the chair is keeping it from collapsing. The left hip, the chair is reminding it to press forward and not fall away. And then you just lean out over the chair if you need an extra block on top of the chair seat to rest your head on, or a couple blocks. Maybe you need a blanket over the chair to pad up the belly a little bit and give yourself more space to fold into, or more support to fold into. But those toes, you can see you're pushing down into the big toe of the right foot, into the big toe mound, to keep it from lifting and rolling out. And then here again, it's not about how close can you get to your right leg. Really go for length here. So lengthen out away from the chair with your back muscles. So you're using your back muscles to extend your spine, and using the shoulder blade muscles to just kind of pull the shoulder blades back and not let them go anywhere. So you're not pulling them down, you're not pulling them in, you're just keeping them in their natural place. Root down into your left heel, so that your feet stay pretty steady here, so that you can just enjoy this forward fold. And you might just lay over the chair and just enjoy it. And keeping your belly softly engaged here, so you can breathe around the contraction in your belly. But when you're ready to come up, the belly's engaged and the back then turns on, and the back starts to lift you up. So lifting up from the back of your body, stepping forward. And we'll do the second side. So for the second side, I'm going to step back first with my right foot, situate the chair then in the front of that left hip, and then the right hip is pressing towards the chair. Right heel is rooting down. You do not have to take your hands all the way down to the chair legs. Again, you could put a block under your forehead. This is not about how deep can you get. I mean, I think it feels better for me even if I were to lengthen out halfway. So if I took my hands up a little higher and stretch my torso out a little bit more, I know I would feel more in my hamstrings. But I guess it just depends on what you want. If you fold over the chair and relax into it, that'll give you more of a back stretch. Notice your shoulders and your hips. If your shoulders are twisting or if your hips are twisting, it's probably because of the other one or the other is to blame. It doesn't matter who's to blame, but if the hips are twisting, probably the shoulders are twisting. And so by that, I mean if your right hip is back, your right shoulder's probably back more. And so having the chair gives you some kind of a reference point for your shoulders to line up with as well. And it's better to have yourself lined up safely than to get deeper. And by getting deeper, I mean like going down lower. It's not necessary. So again, root down into the left big toe mountain, squeeze the left thigh. And again, your core is engaged, even if you're lying out here in a restful position. Well, as restful as this could be, right? The belly is still engaged. And you're breathing around that soft core contraction. All right, and then next inhale, we're going to come up to stand. So come up halfway, press down into both feet, engage your back muscles, and lift yourself the rest of the way up. And then you can take the chair out and step forward. We're going to set up for hero pose next. So you're going to want your chair, bolster, and blanket probably. We're going to open the chair up and set that guy upside down. So set it upside down with the chair bottom facing out, the chair legs facing out. And then you're going to grab your bolster and put that on top of the chair. This setup is just going to be, it may have to be different for you. So play with it. I'm showing you a couple different ways. I'm putting 2 blocks under the bolster. I would prefer that chair did not have those 2 leg rungs, but they do. So I'm putting the bolster on top of those 2 blocks so that the bolster doesn't fall down. I'm going to put a blanket for my hips. So this is one setup. And then another setup is to take the blocks out, and maybe the bolster will stay, and then sit on the blocks instead. So you could put the block down and then a blanket. I'm actually going to take these 2 blocks and turn them up. You'll see once I get into position. So I'm going to turn it up that height, but then I'm going to put 2 blocks side by side and then turn them. You could use a blanket for your head. And then I decided I want to back bend instead. So if you get into this and you feel like it's not a good back bend, or if it's too much of a back bend, don't do it. Take the blanket. Right, take the blanket in over under your head. So you can see here I've turned those 2 blocks to the skinny side by side so that I've got something for my sit bones to sit on. And then I'm going to come right in front of the bolster, use the chair legs as my hand rest. I like this one. It took me a few setups to find the one I liked. So take your time, play with it. And you may not even want to use the chair. Sometimes the props are just more hassle than they're worth, and call it what it is. So here, this is pretty chill. I like this. Again, here's what I was saying. If you think this is too much of a back bend with your head coming back, or if it's, because even this doesn't look like a back bend here, but even the slightest adjustment with lifting my head up would have pulled pressure out of my low back. I did not feel pressure in my low back. This felt fine. But if that's what you're feeling, it may just have to be a lift of the head or a lift of your hips. You may need even higher surface lift under your hips. So if you want to put a block, or rather a blanket on top of those 2 blocks, that will be nice. My bolster is super thick and chunky, so if you have a smaller bolster, it might be better. Blankets over those rungs, I would not recommend. They're probably going to hurt. You can probably feel the rungs through the blanket. Hands can go wherever you want and take as long as you need to resituate. I'm going to scooch a little farther away from the chair. This actually felt a lot better. Boom, there it is. Finally. So you can see even I've lost that pitch in my hips. There's not so much of an extension, rather flexion in my hips. They're a little bit more extended now. And take as long as you want here. This is just a really great relaxation posture. It feels good. Letting your elbows rest on those chair legs. Or if you've got a couple extra stools or something you can put under your arms to rest your arms out on, a couple extra blocks you could put your hands out on. At any point in time, if you feel like you can't breathe, if your throat is getting dry, it's probably because your head has dropped back too far and you're putting too much pressure on the throat and breathing in through that pressurized area. So lift your chin and prop your head up a little bit if you're starting to feel like you need to cough or the breath just isn't coming in and it's drying out your throat. And you may not feel a lot of stretch here, and that's not the point of this. This is kind of a relaxation posture. And so notice here where you're looking for extra sensation. Notice those tendencies and those habits. And if that's something that you're guilty of, as I am, how can you just relax into it a little bit more? All right, take as long as you'd like there. You can pause the video, and then when you're ready, you can come up. So the next thing we're going to do is super fun. I love this. This is like a ballet. This is like a yoga ballet shoe. So you're going to use a belt, open it up and lengthen it out a little bit. So again, I have that buckle clicker belt. And if you have their D-rings or any other kind of buckle, just open it up. So this is confusing. I'm going to take the belt and slide it between the big toe from underneath. So each big toe. And then I'm going to crisscross over the big toe mound. Okay. Bear with me. So you can see there I've got my two toes kind of taped together. The strap went under the big toes, between the first and second toe, and then crisscrossed over. Now I'm taking the strap around the back of my ankles, crisscrossing again, taking the strap over the front of my shins, crisscrossing again, and then it's going to go behind the calves, crisscross, come up, and then buckle. So right here, I'm going to take that over and click it. And then you might have to adjust it if you've got a belt like mine, or if you've got the D-rings or any other kind of a clasp. You may just have to tighten it up once you get it in place. So space them out so they're smooth, not wrinkly, not twisted, not digging in. And you've got this running about from your big toe all the way up to like right at the top of the shin, so right below the knee. Make sure there aren't any loose areas, even it out. It might move once we get into our setups. I'm going to show you a couple different options. The first one, you may want to just take a seated forward fold. In fact, I love the seated forward fold with this. It gives you this idea of pushing into the big toes, pulling the pinky toes back, keeps the legs together. It feels really good. I love this. It feels so good. Okay, so that's one option. All right, so option 2 then, or coming up to the wall. This is not going to be super easy with your legs tethered together. So my first attempt was dumb. It didn't work out so well, so I realized I wasn't going to get anywhere like that. So come up to the wall and sit by the wall with your hip, and then whoop, those legs go up. Hopefully you have a rope to hold on to. All right, and then once your legs get up there, you can situate yourself. If your belt came loose, you can move it around, tighten it up again. And this is really nice just to have your legs up in the air with your feet up to your knees connected. You don't have to hold your legs up. It just feels good. All right, so that's one option. And then you could additionally put something under your hips. So whatever you've got close by, that bolster, blanket, those blocks. The blanket was the closest thing for me, so I'm just going to grab that, roll it up, and stick it under your hips. This will give you a little bit more of a boost, and it'll be more of an inversion. So ideally, if I were going to land here, I'd probably want those 2 blocks, or at least a block under my hips. But you can see it's getting the hips a little higher. It's a nice inversion. So that's the other option. The last one I'm going to do here is Headstand Sheersh-Asana. This is my favorite, or as you can see, crawl over to the mat. Oh boy. And you're gonna set up for Sheersh-Asana headstand, okay? So get all your stuff out of the way, because last thing you need is anything else tripping you up with your feet bound together. Okay, it's going to situate that, get it tighter. Of course, it's come kind of loose. And then when you come into headstand, hands and knees, you could play with dolphin pose here. You could play with, I mean, shoot, if you really wanted to, you could use a chair. Just really be careful with that. You can have to hop up to the chair. I'm not liking that idea too much. So the demonstration I'm going to give you here is simply headstand. So I'm going to take my hands, you can take tripod is what I was setting up for, but then I decided to do supported headstand. So you can take tripod headstand or hands behind your head, interlace your fingers, elbows to the floor. Then you're going to shift your hips over your head and pull your legs up together. The knees could be bent. They do not have to be straight, but as you can see, you can't separate your feet and jump. That's what I love about this. So something that you could do is put a block under your feet. I had mentioned the chair, but I really don't think that's a great idea. First off, it's going to be awkward to get into it. As much energy as it takes to get into the chair, you might as well just do the headstand. But a block under your feet might be a little easier. You could start by standing on the block and then set up for headstand. This reminds you to engage your legs, your glutes, so press into the strap. It's like you want to break the strap off your legs from your toes up to your shins. Wherever the strap is connected, you're pressing into it and trying to break it off. This will be the easiest headstand once you get into it. It'll seem like effortless almost because your legs are working so much and your arms don't have to do as much. And please feel free to stay here only as long as it's comfortable for you. Some things to keep in mind while you're here, and please come down at any point in time when you're ready, but pressing down into your elbows, pressing down into your wrists. Use your neck muscles to push your head down so you're not just dumping your weight into your head. Your head should be pushing the floor away along with the rest of the foundation. Your core is engaged, and it's probably more naturally engaged with this setup because your legs are engaged. And you're pressing up into the strap with your big toes. And feel yourself breathing comfortably around this posture. Another modification or another posture you can take is the staff pose. The staff pose in headstand. So you're dropping your feet halfway. Your hips are going to come way back over your head if you're taking that expression. And then you can stay here for as long as you like. Let your hips move back over your head, pushing down into your elbows. In this expression, you're really using your triceps. Because as you can see, there's a pull back and your triceps are working more because your shoulders pulled back a little bit. So your triceps are extending the elbows a little bit more. And then you can lower your feet down nice and slow. And when you land on your feet, you can take your knees down and just enjoy a moment in Balasana if you need to get that strap off. I feel like, yeah, that didn't feel good. If I can remember going back and thinking about that, that felt awful. So take the belt off and get it out of the way, and then enjoy child's pose. All right, kick that belt off to the side, come down into hands and knees, and open your knees apart, point your toes back. Yeah, thumbs up. I love that one. That's one of my favorite ways to take headstands, so play with that. It's good stuff. All right, so in this child's pose, just settle in for a few moments. Make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time to rest after that headstand. If you are in legs up against the wall, you can at this point move away from the wall, hug your knees into your chest. If you want to take the reclining version of child's pose, Uttanasan. And we're going to end this practice in a seated position against the wall just for a brief meditation, breath awareness exercise. So as long as you need to be in child's pose or Uttanasan, please take your time. And when you're ready to come up to seated, we're going to use a block for this next setup. So you're going to use a wall and a block if you've got some wall space handy. If not, that's fine. And if you're not using the wall, you just come to an easy seated position anywhere on your mat that's comfortable for you. All right. And your hands would rest on your lap, on your knees. So the reason I want to use the wall is because I feel like I'm pitching forward in this seated pose. So I'm going to grab a block and I'm going to go back to the wall. And I'm going to take the long edge of the block against the wall between the wall and my sacrum. So the block doesn't quite hit the floor. There's space between the floor and the wall. It's not anywhere near the floor, actually. And you're just holding the block up. You're not really leaning into it. You're just holding it up. So it is not going to feel like anything other than holding a block up against a wall. Sometimes this feels anticlimactic. It's not supposed to be a big aha moment. It's just an awareness practice, which really that should be a big aha moment, but unfortunately we don't always catch those. So here you can feel your head move back over your pelvis a little bit better. The spine is tall. Your head's not on the wall. Your shoulders are not on the wall. And there's space there. So I'm going to show you here exactly where this should be lined up on your pelvis. I'm going to turn and show you because sometimes that gets confusing. So you can see it's just right there. It's not up there. It's not up at your low back. It's not on your glutes. That can be a little confusing. So it's right on the back of your sacrum. Okay, yep, right there. All right, so situate yourself. And if you need something to sit on, that's fine. The block will move higher up the wall. So maybe you need to sit on a blanket to lift your hips and allow your knees to open up a little bit more. Take any leg variation that you'd like, lotus, half lotus. And then once you get yourself comfortably situated, feel your shoulders soften over your hips and open your chest without extra work, without extra effort. And take the next few moments here to practice a breath awareness meditation on your own. You don't need me to tell you how to focus on your breath, but I'm going to get you started and then I'm going to let you end it. So notice the pace of your breath, the sound of your breath, the location of your breath. Notice if one side of your nostril is more open than the other. Notice the temperature of your breath, the coolness, the warmth. And notice anything else about your breath that comes up, and love it, appreciate it, and sit with it. And take as long as you've got here to be just with you and your energy. Thanks, yogis.